When King's Fall was released, I made a video covering 7 game-changing tips to help make the raid easier for you and your fire teams. You guys really seem to enjoy that style of content, so we'll be doing the same thing this time around. After spending 22 straight hours in the Root of Nightmares on Saturday, I was able to help 60 Guardians get their contest emblems and learned a ton about the intricacies of this raid in the process. Today, I'll be sharing 7 key tips that many players don't know about just yet that will make this raid significantly easier whether you have a team or plan on going into LFG as a solo player. I'm Above, and if you enjoyed today's video, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. Now, let's get into it. The first tip of today's video takes us to Cataclysm, the opening raid encounter. The mechanics here are relatively simple. Charge the nodes, kill the tormentors to prevent the sweeping terror debuff from wiping you, and clear ads to stay alive. Giving your runner enough time to finish empowering the nodes is by far the hardest part of this encounter, especially when you start to run out of ammo as you reach the final set. After all, killing tormentors becomes a hell of a lot harder when you don't have the ammo to nuke them right away. And this is where tip number 1 comes in, which is timing tormentor kills properly. There are 3 checkpoints in this encounter that are triggered each time you complete a set of nodes. When the checkpoint is reached, the sweeping terror debuff will subside, at which point most people clear the rest of the room so they're ready for the next phase, including all of the tormentors. But what most people don't know is that you can leave the last tormentor alive each time and wait to kill it until the next wave begins. This timer is stackable with the tormentors from the next phase, which means that if you wait to kill it as we do here, you'll start with more than a minute on the sweeping terror debuff, making the back half of this encounter an absolute breeze. Tip number 2 takes us to Scission, the raid's second encounter. This tip revolves around the launchers that are used to transport the light and dark debuffs to each side, and why you should actually avoid using them as much as possible. I'm not sure if this is just a PC thing, or if this happens on console as well, but these launchers are wildly inconsistent. Sometimes they'll shoot you too high, sometimes too low, and sometimes they'll launch you at hyperspeed into a wall and either kill you or leave you 1 HP. So to avoid this, you can use several types of movement tech to transport the buffs back and forth without using the launchers at all. If you're advanced, Well and Shatter Skating work great here. And if you're not as advanced with movement tech, you can use Strand Grappling or even just an Eager Edge Sword and either Icarus Dash or Lion Rampants to reach the other side. This speeds up the encounter and ensures that you don't fall victim to the launchers, which is the true first raid boss. The next several tips take place in the Macrochasm encounter, also known as the Planets. This encounter stumped a lot of teams on day 1, but at its core, the encounter is actually pretty simple. You have 1 light side, 1 dark side, and 2 misplaced planets on each side that need to be put back into their proper place. Tip number 3 is all about simplifying our callouts, and it all stems from identifying that the room isn't split into just 2 sections, it's actually split into 4. There are 6 planets on each side, broken down into 2 groups, the top 3 planets and the bottom 3 planets. Each group of 3 will only ever have 1 incorrect planet that needs to be swapped to the other side. Each section also spawns in a Colossus that grants the planetary insight buff. So if you don't want to be on call-out duty, make sure you aren't the one that gets the final blow on this enemy. And if you do want to get the call-outs, then make sure you are the one who kills it. This gives you control over who will be getting the call-outs, and you'll only ever have to call out for your specific section only, then swap with your partner on the opposite side of the room. So instead of calling out L1 and L6 and R2 and R5, you only ever have to remember L6 and R5. It makes it very simple to do and makes communication much cleaner in this encounter. Tip number 4 takes us to the start of the Explicator's damage phase and how you can tell the order of the damage plates before the boss ever even reveals his first shield type. As you go to dunk the light and dark auras on the center plates, there will always be 2 of one color and 1 of the other. In this case, we have 2 light and 1 dark. But what most people don't know is that the boss will never choose the same aura on back-to-back plates, which means the damage will always start on the plate with 2 of the same color. So in this case, damage will start on light, then go to dark, then back to light again. This allows you to pre-plant a well on the first damage plate and have a defined route in mind for future damage plates that allow you and your fire team to maximize your damage, which will help you get clears consistently. This brings me to tip number 5, which relates to the final damage plate. Most people thought that this plate was bugged on day 1, as the damage window seems significantly shorter than the other 2 plates, but that's actually not the case at all. You don't need to wait for the boss's shield to glow a certain color before heading to the final plate. Take what you learned from tip 4 and instantly head to the final damage plate for DPS, which will give you far better damage output in this encounter. This was a massive damage check for a lot of teams on day 1, but having this additional knowledge was definitely helpful for my team, and I know it'll be helpful for you guys in future clears moving forward. Tip number 6 is all about speeding through the second jumping puzzle with the wipe mechanic. I know a lot of people dislike the length of this area, but I actually find it super fun, especially if you know how to well and shatter skate. And though not everyone knows how to do this, I figured I'd include some useful skips as a bonus tip for those who do. After all, you only need one person to make it to the end of the jumping puzzle, at which point you can have your team leave and rejoin when they reach the boss fight. The first skip is actually on the right pillar at the beginning of the jumping puzzle. This will take you right to the first field of light, where you can grab the aura, then hit a second skate to the building on the right hand side and grab the darkness refuge buff for protection from the wipe mechanic. And just like that, you're at the first checkpoint in less than 30 seconds. As I mentioned at the start of the video, these jumps are likely possible with strand grappling, so feel free to try that method if you're not comfortable with skating. The 7th tip brings us to Nezarec, the final boss encounter. On day 1, most teams accidentally brute force the wipe mechanic by simply completing the nodes as quickly as possible. In fact, most people had no idea that this mechanic existed until after they completed the raid. Well, you can survive the wipe mechanic, and it all comes down to the Field of Light and Darkness refuge buffs that we used in the previous jumping puzzle. I believe this is the first time a mechanic has ever been taken from a jumping puzzle and incorporated into an actual encounter, which is why it caught a lot of people off guard. When you reach the encounter, approach Nezarec in his tomb and activate the spawn animation, then jump off the map. This ensures that the light and darkness fields spawn immediately when you start the encounter afterwards. If you don't, these fields will be on a 10-second delay due to his opening animation, which makes it much harder to bypass this mechanic. When you restart the encounter, if you're quick, this added time allows you to complete both nodes before he ever enters his wipe mechanic, which allows you to get to DPS as quickly as possible. If you happen to one-phase the boss, you'd never have to worry about this mechanic at all. But if you don't, or you simply don't want to rush it, this is where learning the wipe mechanic comes in handy. When the encounter starts, Nezarec will have 2 crit spots appear on his shoulders, and when you shoot these, the boss will emit a burst of energy that reveals which field you'll need to stand in when the wipe mechanic begins. If you break the boss's shoulders before he jumps down, it can bug the mechanic and prevent the boss from revealing its true shield type. So wait until he jumps down, then break the shoulders and make the call out to your teammates. If it's dark, the light side runner will need to grab the Field of Light buff and activate a darkness node. And if it's light, the dark side runner will need to grab the darkness refuge buff and activate a light node. One thing to note is that you cannot use a node that is currently being used to refresh the buff. It has to be the node that has already been activated and does not have an aura surrounding it. I personally like to use these starting nodes because as long as you've completed at least 3 of them before the boss enters his wipe mechanic, these will never be active, which means it's always safe to use them. Once you've grabbed the buff, get out of there. This is a mobile buff, which means you do not need to stand in the field to survive the blast. The boss will likely be aping you at that location anyway, so you're gonna want to get out of there as quickly as possible. Well guys, that's gonna do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. I also stream live over on Twitch at twitch.tv/above, where I'll be doing raid help for my community all season long. So feel free to stop by and let me know you're from YouTube so that we can get you a run. Anyways guys, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace!